Uh, Good morning, everyone, and welcome to IBD Live, where we help you make more money in the stock market every day. I'm Ed Carson, news editor here at IBD, and with me today are Chris Gessel, Chief Content Officer, Ken Shreve, our senior markets writer, and a big part of the leaderboard and a lot of other features, and Mike Webster, our head market strategist. Rachel Fox, one of our markets writers, she's going to be our tweeter in chief during the show using the hashtag IBD Live. And David Chung, Deputy Markets Editor, he is off screen answering questions, and David is really good at answering questions, so I would just blame him if he doesn't answer your question.
Wow, throw him under the bus just because not in the room.
I'm sure he won't chip in at any time. For those who are new, we analyze the pre-market trading and at least the first hour of trading, and we try to focus on actionable trading ideas. And there are some actionable trading ideas despite the futures being down. But we also discuss the core tenets of core investing. I think it's a good way to speed up the learning curve or reinforce a lot of the CAN-SLIM ideas that you may be familiar with. Before we can begin, just remember that IBD Live is for informational purposes only. None of the stocks discussed here should be considered buy or sell recommendations. So, please do your own research. So let's do a quick check-in. Chris, what are you looking at today?
Well, you were talking about actionable stocks, and there's a trio: Corvo, Cirrus, Logic, and Lam Research, QRVO, CRUS, and LCRX. Or did I get that wrong again? Is it
I think you got it right. LRCX, yeah.
LRCX.
That's a tough one.
There you go. And all of them have been, pulling back and gapping higher. So we'll check those charts in the morning and see if they're playable on the earnings gaps.
All right, Mike, what do you have for us today?
Well, since Chris did three, I was only going to do one, but I'm feeling the pressure, so I'm going to do the diabetes stock. So Dexcom, Tandem, and Pod.
Right.
Just for fun, keeping up with the Joneses.
That's a nice mix of stocks. And Ken, could you give us a rundown on the news today? Not much going on, right?
Not much going on. Yeah, we got another busy day of headlines. We'll start by taking a look at index futures off session lows, but still down about 0.5%, 0.6%. Coronavirus back in the headlines. Looks like about 170 deaths now confirmed in China. With nearly 8,000 cases reported. Apparently, India has its first reported case. Amazon.com, which reports earnings after the close today, they are banning employee travel to China. And then news that Russia is going to close its border with China. Delta Airlines, they're going to limit flights to China starting February 6th. So coronavirus back in the headlines. Interesting to note this action in the bond market. 10-year Treasury yield down another 2 basis points to 1.57%. That was after a pretty sharp drop yesterday. It looks like the yield, 10-year yield, has inverted slightly with the 3-month bill and the 6-month bill. Crude oil down another 2% to 52.34 a barrel. And again, this is all coronavirus related, starting to get some concerns about global growth. We closed for the stock market Wednesday. No real surprises from the Fed meeting, but Fed Chairman Jerome Powell said that the Fed does plan to slow bond purchases in the second quarter. Fed has been buying bonds known as quantitative easing to help keep interest rates low. We did have a stalling session for the NASDAQ yesterday, kind of a weak close for the stock market. Economic news today: first estimate to fourth quarter GDP growth at 2.1%. That was in line with estimates for the full year GDP growth, 2.3%. That was actually a little above what the Fed was expecting this year. Fed was at 2.2%. It's interesting to see the Fed's projections for GDP growth in 2021. They're looking for 2% growth, and then 1.9% growth in 21 and 1.8% growth in 2022. Okay, all the stock news. We got a lot of big earnings winners today. A bit ironic because we are seeing a lot of red in the market, but earnings winners, Microsoft, cloud business continues to boom there. This is a stock that has been showing supporting action at its 10-week moving average after a breakout. Chris mentioned these Apple suppliers, Cirrus Logic
That
and
Microsoft
Qorvo.
is up almost 4%,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
great in a bad tape.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. The transition to cloud here has been very impressive. This has been a story for several quarters in a row for Microsoft, but obviously a big player in cloud computing. Chris mentioned Cirrus Logic and Qorvo, not only Apple suppliers, but big 5G plays. These both of these stocks look poised for bounces off their 10-week moving average. Leaderboard stocks, ServiceNow and Tesla poised to open sharply higher. So we are happy about that. Pretty good quarter for Bill McDermott. He's the new CEO at ServiceNow, formerly of German software giant SAP. Also, take a look at Lam Research, one of the first stocks, one of the first chip stocks to break out. Actually, all the way back in the second half of last year, the chip equipment stocks were really among the first to move in the semiconductor industry. Susquehanna raises LRCX's price target to 400 from 220. I was talking to Mike about Lam Research earlier, saying, well, it may be extended here, but he says, oh, maybe the weekly chart has maybe an ascending base type look to it. So Mike will chime in on that.
Yeah, not perfect, but it's in that genre.
Not perfect, but has a little bit of a look there. And then the two big earnings losers today, Facebook down about 7%. When you're talking about slowing sales growth, rising costs, and weaker profit margin, that's generally not going to be good news for a stock. And so that's why you have Facebook down 7%. PayPal also disappointing. Pretty good numbers, but the stock is down 2.5%. We'll see if it can hold above its intraday low from a few days ago. That would be positive, I think. PayPal talking
that was down a lot more yesterday, right?
It was down about 5% at one point. It was kind of a quick reaction, but it has shaved losses. So we'll see. We'll see how it trades today. PayPal talking up Venmo, 52 million active accounts. That was up from 40 million early last year. PayPal just completed its, or didn't complete its purchase, but they just announced an acquisition, $4 billion in cash for Honey, which is a shopping and rewards platform, and total payment volume at PayPal up 22% to 199 billion. That was a little bit of a deceleration from 25% growth in the third quarter. After the close today, a couple of big earnings reports we're watching. Leaderboard stock Vertex Pharmaceuticals, one of the leading biotech stocks out there, and also Amazon.com. It's still working on a cup with handle base. Its chart looks a little bit like Netflix did before Netflix reported earnings, just kind of working on a cup with handle base. We'll see what the numbers look like from Amazon after the close today. Ed, that's what I got.
Hey, thank you very much. All right. Well, I just thought I'd share the screen with on MarketSmith here, because I just want to start off with
just 1 second. We were getting word from Scott Sinclair that people couldn't see Ken. So you guys might want to check your emails. Are we able to see him?
Okay, I can
I
see
see
him.
him.
So anyway,
Okay.
but I'm calling up the cues here. Just you can see here's the pre-market action down 0.6%, 220.43. So we're going to open just over this level, sort of right in this middle of this range. So we've been in sort of the coronavirus range, to be honest with you. So that's also the market is also coming down because probably continuation of the comments on the Fed yesterday. So if we hold in this range, I think people would generally feel like we're sort of holding in along around the 21-day. If we move sideways for a little bit, the 50-day line would do some more catching up, because it was getting sort of extended up in this area. So I think this would be relatively healthy. And I know that's what you guys have been saying the last few days. So
Yeah, definitely. We don't want to see this get overheated and then just implode. And of course, we don't want to see it roll over either. So a few days of sideways action would really let that 50-day moving average catch up to the market, which would be good. It's just, the thing is, we know that this is good for the market. It's just, I don't like it when it's
nobody
red
has
at
fun.
the open.
Yeah, like 90% of my screen is red. It's not fun, but it's better to be red in the morning than at the close.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So we'll see how it works out. But I completely agree with what both of you guys said. This is healthy, and staying between that range is ideal. And the longer we stay, the better. Assuming it's not too long, but I would say a week or two would be
right
picture perfect.
All right, well, I'm going to share a screen of moving over just to get a 5-minute chart of Corvo. As you can imagine, it's gapping up. It actually gapped up really quickly and came down. So that's not the greatest 1-minute open here.
Nope.
The market is obviously selling off. You can see, we've got losses of 0.5, 0.6, 0.7 or so to start, but that's not as bad as it could be. LRCX, also, I think all of those chip names, not the greatest open.
Nope.
They've been not. So it's hard to get a lot of picture here. I'm just going to go back to various.
And let's also take a look at now, another one that's gapping up out of the shelf. Same sort of thing.
Yeah, even though the market seems to be coming off a low, so maybe there was that initial spot. So we'll see if they can, shore up again, because it seems like Corvo is already off its, 1-minute low.
Okay.
So it's at near the high of that. So it just had
Could we switch to the MarketSmith charts now?
Yeah.
And get a better sense of. All right.
Now, yesterday, it's not quite starting in. Yesterday, it came down, even though Apple had a strong day, but a lot of the Apple chip makers came down because they're also 5G plays. Okay, here we are. Now it's popping up here. As you see, it's gapping above this, gapping above the 50-day, 10-week line. If you look on a weekly,
let's go to the weekly
chart, it also has a 3 weeks tight. It sort of was a 4.5-week consolidation. There was a tight pattern in here. I'll be honest, Cirrus and Lam Research also have tight patterns, also are rebounding from their 50-day lines.
Yeah, I mean, besides the fact that the market's selling off, it really seems like growth is taking a bigger hit today than the market. So that's always the downside of this. But Corvo, I mean, stock that was one of the first ones to really break out and run higher. And this is a good second chance if you miss that first breakout.
Yeah, Fidelity Contra is in there. I'm not crazy about the numbers if you kind of highlight the quarterly area.
Right.
They're kind of all over the place, and not certainly 4% sales is not anything to get excited about. But I do like the action in the stock, and in the weekly chart, it's had a decent move, enough that shows that it's a leader, but not so much that it feels extended, like it's
I'm going to go to
too far.
Cirrus Logic, because that one is really moving. It was only up about 4%, and it's actually up 10%, so it's actually a little higher than this. This one, if you want a little bit better numbers, here we go. As you can see, we've had several quarters of improvement on Cirrus Logic. It's already had a few moves, but
and the key there is, if you go down to the quarterly earnings, it's not that it's 55%, that it's 55 up from 44, up from 25, up from a negative. So when we see acceleration, that was always a big thing that Bill would always focus on, is 3 quarters of acceleration. If you had it in earnings and sales, it was even better. And so you do have that in sales. I mean, although it is coming from a negative rate up to positive. So I would say this one is certainly a higher quality, from at least from a quarterly standpoint.
Move too. Since then, and broke out earlier.
And like Corvo, we mentioned the tight weekly closes for Corvo. Cirrus is doing the same thing. You had a little 4 weeks tight pattern here, just above the 10-week moving average. So
again, the market continues to come way off of lows. The Nasdaq is only down about 0.4 or even less. Chris, what did you want to say?
Let's take a look at Lam.
Yeah, and Cirrus is obviously, they're all over the place. I mean, some of these stocks, you can see some of their movements. Lam is
now the market is looking a lot better. This is much more normal in the
so
looking at my own stuff.
Again, all of them had this 10-week line. Lam is above the 4 weeks tight, as Ken was saying.
Can we look at the daily on that one and see what it? Yeah, that.
Now, this isn't Lam's like meat lamb.
That would be Lamb Weston, maybe.
Okay.
But like,
it's too early for my jokes.
But it ended several quarters of declining earnings and sales. I mean, you're seeing all those companies turn around. It's supposed to be stronger growth. I can't remember what quarter. I think it was Q3 and it was going into Q4. So 2020 is almost over.
Right.
So we're going to have better growth in 2021. That'll be starting,
Let's jump to now, because that's another one that was a breakaway or possibly.
Yeah, how do we want to describe this one? Nice action, breaking out of its fifth buy point. By my count.
Right, but let's go to the weekly.
All right.
And look at the bigger picture. And so, we were finding earlier buy points, and definitely there's there was a handle in there, and then the break of the trend line and everything.
The shakeout +3 was the first thing.
So for me, I'm not going to do anything with this, but especially if you've already got shares, this would be a good place to add some shares.
I have a token position, and it's funny. I was just adding some, but not too much, just because is a small position, and so that comes with its own problems. Is because then when you're adding, I pretty much doubled the small position, so it's still a small position, but if you're buying a big chunk here, then you're kind of setting yourself up for a shakeout. So I'll wait and see how the rest of the day plays out. I might add to it throughout the day.
So I'm also guessing this is well above the 10-week, but if you could click on that, Ed, let's see where. Oh, it's probably not updated yet.
Yeah, but actually it is. It's 14% now.
So
it's getting up there. The NASDAQ is now down 0.1%, really nice rebound. I'm going to just call it, there's a couple other things we were talking, like a couple other software makers are doing well today. I'm sorry.
Can we go to MDB? This is a stock that Justin, found yesterday.
Yeah, I'm just going to show that just show its action. It's up here.
Sorry.
Or no, just briefly, it's trying to get above this sort of alternate entry. It obviously broke out from here, but yeah, let's, we don't have to go into it much. It's looking good.
Yeah, just because we haven't talked about this one.
No.
I don't think since we've been on IBD Live, but the three of us were looking at this, and then, Justin saw it moving yesterday, and we put it on Swing Trader. And what we're seeing here is, there is that larger base that's being picked up as a cup, but really there's the recent cup with high handle, or you could call it a cup without handle that has a little shelf.
Or the medium cup.
Yes, actually, I don't know if you're joking, but there is a medium cup with a cup with, no, but he's right.
No,
there's a medium cup from the 160.41 over to the 152.33. That's your cup portion. And then this other cup is your handle of that. So we see patterns within patterns all the time, and this is part of this larger structure. It really isn't a cup, but it's picked up that way. So there's a lot of things going on. The key is finding areas of resistance for it to go over. I do have a position in this, so yesterday it broke that downtrend. Could you draw that little downtrend over the little handle?
Oh, okay.
The handle or the shelf.
There we go.
Yeah.
So as it was going through there, that's when you start buying it. Now that it's going through the 160.41 over there, that area of resistance, you can add to it. So this is just how you look at patterns, and you find different areas of resistance, and those are logical areas to increase your position.
This is a stock too where sometimes we get questions from people. Well, why are you looking at a stock with an EPS rating of 12 and a composite rating of 51? But it is, it is a valid question, but we've been talking about stocks like this before, where you're just kind of weighing the positives and the negatives. Obviously, ratings wise, this stock does not measure up, but Mike just went through the stock's technical strength, which is compelling. This is a company that is showing outstanding sales growth because of strong demand for a new product and service. And you got a couple of top-rated fidelity funds that own the stock. So it's got a good sponsorship story as well. So, every once in a while, we're going to talk about stocks like this that may not measure up ratings-wise, but there are enough positive qualities where for Swing Trader, it makes sense to let people know about it.
Ken, you are so right. And with this, the key is really that huge sales growth. So we were looking at Corvo and Cirrus and compare that sales growth to this sales growth. I mean, this is massive, and that's why it had that huge move last year. I'm typically not a fan of a stock that builds this giant base at the top of a bunch of smaller bases, but it really had just gone out of favor for a while. And the sponsorship is great. You've got Wells Fargo Discovery, which is a great fund. Invesco Oppenheimer Discovery, great fund. Contra is in there. Point 72 is in there. Gilder is in there. Did I mention Wells Fargo Growth? Yeah, so there's tons in there. So how do you look at this one, Chris?
Well, we've talked a little bit about this where you just need to look at the market and what is working in the market. And what we've noticed over the last few years, especially with newer stocks, is that Wall Street really rewards sales growth and
massive sales growth.
Yeah, massive sales growth. And we've also talked about there's been a shift in how the IPO market works. Private equity is a much larger player, and they're typically keeping companies. It's funny, it's a bifurcation of the IPO market. They're either coming public really soon before they have any growth, or they're being held back until they come public as mega caps.
And then the Ubers that we were talking
right.
about.
And so there are very few companies coming public with earnings and sales growth. But when they have the sales growth, that's they'll make some very massive moves. And really, that's the origin of Can Slim. Bill was what works in the market, what's doing this, and so
the relative strength line is well off its highs, but on a daily and a weekly, it's above sort of the high of the handle. It's above this area. I'd like to move over to Datadog. A couple of people are mentioning this, and this one actually sort of sneakily broke out yesterday.
It had a blue dot. We
Big
don't
deal.
see, but the blue dot on MarketSmith says that the RS line is confirming or leading the breakout. And
you can find it under
this is
open
the
stock.
easiest way, because I'm always saying, what's the RS doing? So it's a great way to just winnow through the market quickly.
You want to explain to people what a blue dot is?
Here's a blue dot right here. Here's a real blue dot.
I need a blue dot.
It's under. You can find it under open stock
VIPs.
ideas, but it's
right. But again, the blue dot is. Can we find one that there's probably not one on there today right now.
Maybe we could circle back to this concept in like a half an hour when we can move forward.
But anyway, because with Microsoft doing well, ServiceNow doing well, and we've seen a trend back to software doing well. Gosh, here we are. Team is moving up to its highs. Mongo is extending its breakout. Datadog is extending its breakout. So it's not, it's you're seeing that kind of positive move in the software.
And I do have a token position now.
I do too. And I'm gonna watch it today, and if it closes well and closes above the buy point, I'll probably add to it.
Yeah, and the key with this one, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we haven't talked about Tesla. It's not actionable, but I was looking forward to hear Ed. I was looking forward to hear Ed. He came in with a bee in his bonnet talking about all the different parts of Tesla's report, and it is gapping up. It's not actionable, but I was kind of interested to hear what you thought about the report, Ed, because there seemed to be a lot of good news there.
There was a lot of good news, and I mean, I was actually saying ahead of time, I really thought they'd come out with really great Q4 numbers. One of the issues of having a new factory is that they're going to make them. It could depress auto margins just because it's hard to.
Can you get that part off your screen, or is that just?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me just.
There you go. Perfect.
But it's doing well. I don't want to get into it. It looks strong. We'll see. They're not. We'll see how well the Model Y does. I mean, there's a lot of excitement. Wow, the Model Y is coming. This is coming. We'll see. The thing that got me upset was his quote basically saying, what does full self-driving mean? Well, basically it means, well, maybe, possibly it could work taking you. It's like, well, that isn't what people paid for, but yeah, whatever. Nobody seems to care. I mean, the stock is flying. I mean, it doesn't matter what my opinion is. This is an ultimate example of why I try not to let my feelings impact. I can't bring myself to buy a stock like Tesla, but I would never short it because the market is saying it is really an awesome stock.
Look, when the stock first started to move, clearly there was short covering going on, and now there's this fear of missing out trade, and it is very extended. It's gapping up after already being very extended. It's been doing a lot of that lately, but it does seem to me that the market is willing to give it a premium here because overall the company does seem to be operating pretty efficiently. I mean, initially this Model Y, they were talking about late 2020 starting production. Then they moved it forward to the summertime, and now they're talking that it's imminent.
Yeah, that could be a reflection of the fact that Model 3 demand in the U.S. is way down.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to throw that out. I mean, just to temper that. I mean, because it tumbled in Q3. I don't know what the Q4 numbers were, but it could be that the U.S. factory, given that the China factory is already there, what are they going to make for the U.S. market? Mm-hmm. I'm just throwing that out.
Okay, so let's just go through.
Let's
the chart.
Let's go to the weekly, because I want to point out something that's you know, a lot of times, and Mike knows this because he presents a lot on model book stocks. Look how many weeks up in a row it is now.
Awesome.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks. And the first week was, you know, pretty small, but that's something that we see when we go back and look at some of these monster movers, that they have moves like that coming out of their first base, and this big long consolidation. I'm impressed. I'm still kicking myself that I missed it.
And volume. The weekly volume has been extraordinarily impressive.
The other thing, I was just checking how far extended it is above the 10-day. It's only about 13-14% right now, which that's you know, it's reasonable. It is starting to look like it's going. There's a little verticalness to it, so it's accelerating after starting a little slower. But I think that at this point, there's going to be a correction. I wouldn't be buying it right now and just waiting for the pullback.
And this is one where there's such a big pocket of error from the 10-day moving average, the 21-day moving average. If you bought on Leaderboard when we bought it or added it to the portfolio at the 361.20 pivot, you know, I mean, it's pretty clear what you can do. You can say, well, you know, you got the 10-day moving average. Maybe it finds support there. If it doesn't, you sell a little bit, and then it breaks the 21-day. I mean, it's still way above both of those support levels. So,
but that,
so this is what I'll say on this. Anyone who's trading this, please, I put a homework assignment on my Twitter. It's very important that you go back and pull up AAXN. Can you pull up AAXN and go to a monthly? Because this is the precedent that I'm using for it. Now, I don't think it's going to be as big of the move because this is a much bigger company, but during that move over there, please go back, do a change date, and study that, because it was a wild, very hard move. I spent hours looking at it over the weekend, and I'm still confused. And I remember trading it back then. And just, if you go day by day and ask yourself, what would you do? That's the homework you need to do now for this stock, because sure, if you own it like I do, you know, you want to be happy today, but I've learned the hard way that on big up days, you know, big down days are going to be coming soon. So don't get excited. I think it's going to form a high tide flag here. I'm not going to tell it what to do. It's going to do whatever it's going to do. A cup with handle at this stage would be odd for this powerful of a move, but I still think it's early on. If you don't own it, you can't buy it here. That's not a smart thing to do. But if you own it and you have a decent cost basis, you know, the way I'm doing it, like I've mentioned all the time, I'm waiting for a decisive break of the 10-week line, which is way below us now.
Yeah.
So just sit tight if you own it. If you don't, wait for a possible high tide flag.
And so you're not going to be taking any money off. You're really going to try to let this one go. And
yeah, I've been, you know, adding to it, not today, but, you know, up this move, just little bits at a time. I'm doing it Bill style.
Okay.
I'm going to call up.
Don't let your average costs get away from you.
Baby steps. Like I'm talking baby, you know, baby steps.
So Okta, I'm just bringing this up. This one is one of those, you know, money-losing cybersecurity company. Strong sales growth. The losses have gotten a little smaller, but they're still expected to lose money through fiscal 21. Boy, it's coming up. It's been coming up on this. Just saying, it's noticing this. The relative strength line, pretty weak. Like Mongo, it tends to have pretty wild bases.
But look, this is a really nice base within the overall base. So this little cup with handle, the 131.55 over the 132.91. I mean, that's a classic looking base, and it has the prior uptrend from the 93.44 on up. And yes, the relative strength line is still a problem, no matter how you.
Whereas in Mongo, the RS line was actually making new highs within the smaller base.
Yeah.
You know, we've also been looking at CyberArk in the security software group, and maybe you can pull up a weekly chart of Cyber. This is it's got a little handle forming here. It was volatile on what was that, Friday or?
Yeah, that's not a misprint, I don't think. That is actual trade. So, but that's a nice shakeout because otherwise it sort of looked a little wedgy in here. Now it had this big shakeout.
Well, if you look at the
down.
weekly chart,
yeah,
you know, it's actually it's pretty interesting. You know, it's got just trading tight up there, and you know, it's still a possible breakout candidate.
Yeah. Some people were.
Could we take yeah, a lot of people were asking about Disney.
Yeah, that one is just not doing very well.
I think Disney is back to what it has been for years.
Yeah.
A big, pokey, slow. I mean, we took advantage of the news off of the streaming platform, and we tried a couple times to see if it would, resume that sort of euphoria, but it's just, it's back to what it is. Big,
the relative strength line.
That's why.
The relative strength line is basically giving up almost everything.
And think about what it has the headwinds right now with the coronavirus. Like, this is the classic. Do you want to go into a crowded space? That is going to have an impact. I know it's very diverse, and they've got their movie stuff, and they've got their online thing, but you can't, look at Disney and not think that
they've shut down Shanghai Disney. They've shut down.
There you go.
I'm going to go back to, I just want to think this is important. We talk about the 5-minute bars at times. I want to show on Corvo.
Ooh.
Yeah, see, and this is something why you wait, because not all of them are doing that. Cirrus, isn't the greatest, but Cirrus is near the highs. It's up 8%. You can't get too upset with that. It had this early print, but other than that, it's sort of been, doing that after the first, trade or so. LRCX is sort of in between. I guess it's all right, but
that's better.
So that looks better. So that's sometimes why you wait, because, like, I'll be honest, Corvo for a while overnight was looking the best. It was looking the best.
Yeti is moving. I was just looking at our Yeti. That it's not really actionable, but I was just trying to find some new merchandise that we haven't talked about in a bit. And that's up on some decent volume. I don't know if it was earnings.
It's because I ordered a replacement lid for my Yeti tumbler.
That'll be a 5% revenue boost.
It's half the cost of the overall.
You had to replace the lid already? What's going on?
Wow, this is not a Yeti, but it keeps my drink cold all day long. I don't know why someone would pay up for,
Good stuff.
like, if you're drinking a lot of water, do you really need your water bottle to stay that cold? You just put some ice in it. And
my experience with those water bottles, if I leave them, if I don't touch them for a day or two, the water smells. So,
if you're camping for a couple of days, how do you smell?
Good question.
On Yeti, why would this not be? I mean, it's messy as all get out.
Well, let's look at the weekly.
I mean, it just sort of seems like it sort of has a handle there, getting towards the high. I'm just,
now I'm regretting asking to pull it up, because it is such a sloppy chart, and it's a fad stock. It's, people are really interested. It's moving on, big volume. Our current volume rate is, on my machine, it's 400%, and so that's why I wanted to bring it up.
But on it?
I'll take a look.
But Mike's right. It's wide and loose, and weekly charts usually are the best way to spot wide and loose trading in a stock, and just kind of erratic.
Hearing M&A speculation. No, that was a few days back. So you just stay away from those things. They never work out. Like maybe 1 in 10. So sorry. My apologies.
Alteryx, which is in the database. It's one of these money. It's recently profitable. It's turning profitable over the last year or so. It's moving towards a buy point. It'll have earnings in a couple of weeks. Somebody was asking about
very
this.
extended, and it's been running. So I would
you'd want it to form a handle, I think. And it's got a pretty
maybe a
deep
little
base.
flat base on up near there. Hey, can we jump to some of the Chinese stocks like LK? is in the leaders watch list is the biggest one down today. So it's down to its 50-day.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, yesterday, maybe making a play on this on the 10-week moving average. It would be below it right now. I guess, it seemed like, the whole coronavirus is yesterday at least was like not a big deal. And it seems like, I haven't been plotting the numbers, but it seems like there was a big acceleration in cases
last couple days
yesterday.
there have been, and I think it has more cases than the SARS virus.
Mm-hmm.
SARS virus is more, from what I've read, was more deadly than this. Though I don't think we really have an idea on it. But yeah,
well, this is why on this
you were
one
saying about
I was
40.
buying at 40 where there's strength, because then you didn't know if this was going to happen. I didn't know that it was going to be down 6% today, but that's why I like buying on strength, because if I bought it yesterday, I'd be puking it out here, and you still don't know if it's done anything wrong because it's right at the 50-day. But I know people that are super successful just buying it as it comes into the 50-day, and at some point they might have a big loss and they finally have to cut it. So you just have to know your personality. If I'm down 6-7%, like I'm freaking out, I'm selling this stuff. Whereas you look at the chart and go, okay, well, that's what you would expect it to do. So why not set yourself up for success if you're like me and you want to, when you buy it, to see it immediately go. That's kind of the Livermore way of when you buy something for it to immediately show progress. To do that, you have to buy on strength. There's no other way around it.
The coronavirus might eventually be too much for these Chinese stocks, but right now this still looks like a test of the 50-day moving average on the daily chart. It hasn't been a decisive break yet. So sometimes really strong stocks, they'll ultimately find support. On the weekly chart,
there's a lot of volume.
Yeah, on the weekly chart it's below the 10-week, but the daily chart it's still testing. So
so let's look and how far. I mean, you can clearly see it's below the 10-week if we check the percentage.
It's 3.4% off according to this. Yeah, so that would be too much.
To my rules, if this were Friday afternoon and we're getting towards the close, this would be a sell for me. But we still have another day and a half of trading, so we'll see how it shakes out. Let's
take a look at BABA.
Yeah.
Great minds think alike.
Okay, I'm going to go on a daily because I'm not sure how it's reacting today. So it tumbled through here, came back above the 50, and now is testing it again.
Yeah, it's actually holding just above the low of the prior day. So that's good.
It's going to see how JD it's holding in there.
New
GSX.
Oriental EDU is just a little bit below.
Yeah, GSX, which is
just
online
an inside day, no big deal.
That is such a monster. I cannot believe we don't own it. None of us own it.
No.
What is wrong with
Dave?
us?
Yeah, Dave.
Dave was on it early on, but I don't think that he owns it. And it's just goes to show that if you use, a rule like, you're going to wait for it to decisively break on this one, maybe even the 21-day, it would have kept you in.
Yeah.
Decisive close below. And it's very easy to say, very hard to do.
It's nice when you get one of those.
Yeah.
They don't come around all the time.
So we have to see. I mean, because it's just like, look, a huge amount of the country is just sort of shut down. I mean, it's like while it may just be a little bit of a blip on the global economy, if it peaks out in a few weeks, it is really slowing the Chinese economy. Right. And it's like there's not much is going on. You can imagine if we basically quarantined LA and Chicago and New York and said, hey, just don't travel in general. I think that would have a big impact on our economy.
But the traffic would be great. So
can we go back to the Qs on?
Okay, sure.
Just on here,
have we turned positive?
No. Actually, we faded again a little bit. The NASDAQ is down about 0.25 or so.
But my point was, this is great action. If you look at the daily, you want it to. It's a relatively now. It's still early in the day, but it's a relatively small spread. And you just wanted to kind of mark time here for a while. So if it can do that in its earnings season, we've got an impeachment going on and we've got this massive virus, that we don't truly know what the impact is going to be. And yet it's tight action after that gap down. So this is what we would like to see. Doesn't mean you get crazy aggressive. It allows you to hold your current positions a little easier and allows you to manage some stocks if you need to, add a little bit here or there.
Right, I'm going to go to PayPal, and then I'd like to get to Facebook. Just PayPal, we would like it was a loser. It tried to cut, actually almost got to break even, sort of like the NASDAQ, but it's pulled back some.
But that has a history of, if you go back to June or January of last year on the earnings day, where it came down, shook people out, and then turned and then never looked back. So I think this is, forming a nice handle area here. I wouldn't buy it now, but I'm going to keep an eye on it because it could end up just forming a handle over the next, well, it already has really a handle. So the high of yesterday would be the first entry that I could see just going over that resistance.
And it's still holding above Monday's low too. I mentioned that in the news. When it so that's news from a swing trading perspective. I think that that's noteworthy. It hit a low of 112.31 on Monday and went down to 112.42 today and moved off its low. So I agree with Mike. This is just a nice little handle area.
Just have to see if it proves itself. Yeah.
Can we go out to the weekly on this one?
Sure.
Because we were talking about some high flyers, like the GSX, the Tesla, the even the MDB, things like that are really high octane type of names. And this is a more slow, pokey, steady stock. And you want to have stocks like this in your portfolio. And typically they're going to be a little bit bigger positions because you can sit with them, but they're not going to be, these things that are going to run up. You're not going to see a GSX move out of a PayPal, but you're not going to have those, those crashing downs like an LK, down 6%, on some random day, typically.
I'm going to go to Facebook because people are asking about this, understandably. The stock tumbled through its 50-day line and bounced back. I think it may be a little different on the weekly, pretty high expenses. So it's right at the 10-week line, but rebounding above the 50-day. Ken, what do you see on this?
Well, I think it's interesting. The daily chart and weekly chart are kind of telling two different stories. I mean, if you go back to the daily chart, I mean, this is support so far at the 50-day moving average. It breached it. Now it's all the way back at its session high, still down about 5.5%. So pretty compelling action at the 50-day. But when you go back to the weekly, and I'm actually going to be writing on 50-day and 10-week moving averages for the Investors Corner this weekend for IBD Weekly. But you go to the weekly chart here, and it's near its low for the week. It's testing support. This is not an example of a stock finding support at the 10-week moving average at this point. So I will say overall, its chart is still intact. It's not flashing any major sell signals, even though it's down sharply today.
I think with stocks, you've got to think of it. This is a company that you're investing in, and some people love Facebook or Instagram and are on it all the time. And if that's the case, this is a perfect stock for you. Looking at, hey, it's getting support today. Maybe if it's able to come back and give you an entry, you're in it. If you're on the other side of the fence, like I am, thinking that they're very intrusive and listen to you, I could be wrong. Who knows? That I'm probably wrong.
No, they listen.
Then you don't trade it, because the first shakeout, you're not going to have confidence in it. It goes back to the when Bill was trading Pick and Save or Price Company, he'd go in the stores, he'd see people buying stuff, he'd count cars in a parking lot and have confidence in the stock. And so just always think about that. It's not symbols that you're buying, it's a part of a company. And that's why I like trading Costco, because I think it's a good place to shop.
I'm also just going to bring up Snap, which is going to have earnings next week. So I think people, on my computer, if it'll go, just that one is holding very nicely, sort of forming a little shelf above the buy point here. They have earnings next week. So I personally would want to try to stay away from it until earnings at this point. But
well, I have a token position in it, and it's going to stay a token until through the earnings. And then if it goes over this area of resistance, then I'll add, then I'll add to it. But I agree with you. You don't want a big position or even a decent position going into earnings if you don't have a cushion.
Hey, can we jump to the diabetes stocks, starting with Tandem, which were your three, Mike?
I know, but I was trying to be nice and wait patiently.
All right. So this is one I think both you and I have positions in this. So what I really liked yesterday, and if we go to the weekly, was just massive volume on the daily bar. We saw that on the weekly, and now, as one of our viewers was pointing out, yesterday's action cleared all the resistance going back for a year, for more than a year. So this is, looks good. It's not as profitable, and it's not in, maybe the sponsorship isn't as good as what we see for Pod and for DXCM.
But it does have good sponsorship, like Lord Abbott's in there, American Century Ultra, Invesco, Oppenheimer Discovery that we talked about with the other ones. But I agree, it's still the Dexcom and the Pod have better sponsorship. Can we go to the monthly?
I'm actually going to just quickly punch over to Okta here.
It was getting it's crossed above that.
But I do want to go back to those stocks.
No. Yeah, the Okta. When are earnings on that? Because that's something
that looks like for another month or so.
That's nice action.
That's estimated. Yeah. So that's breaking out.
Something I might be buying actually. So
anyway, just wanted to circle back. We discussed it already. The RS line is above this little handle-ish area. So there is that. And we'll just have to see. Otherwise, it is rising on a down day, so the RS line is going to get that extra kick.
Yep.
So I'm going to go back to a Tandem monthly because you asked so nicely.
So you're trying to slow me down on my buy of Okta. I see what the goal is. So with this one, the thought process behind it is when you're looking at the Pod, the Dexcom, and in this one, just pull up each one of the monthlies so you understand what you're dealing with. So the Pod, okay, that's what you like to see in a growth stock, something that's had a prior nice move up. And let's go over to Dexcom. Same thing. Now let's go over to Tandem. So that's what you're playing with, even though I think the breakout is the strongest of this one. And, both Chris and I bought it yesterday, and I'm looking to, to add to it. What's nice is it had that power up in 17 and 18, but the fact that the stock fell like it did before means it can do it again. That's what we look to a character of a stock of. You can always expect the same type of action that it had in the past. So now let's go over to the daily real quick. That breakout yesterday was very significant because it had big volume, and as Chris mentioned, it cleared out all of the resistance that it's had.
RS line at a new high. Too.
Exactly. So let's move over to a couple of the other ones.
Well, I just wanted to also show on the breakouts, this one clearly blasted out, as you're talking about. But it's also, look at the other breakouts that it tried. It broke out, but didn't get that much, and the second day went right over. Here, midpoint of the range, a little bit above, went the next day. Here, a little bit above, it struggled. It did make it, but man, it was not great there either. So, Ken,
and I'll have to say with this one, those breakouts, I tried at least 2 of those breakouts, and because of the story and the group move and everything, and because the prior move up off the bottom, and they just didn't work out. And it's not a nice trading stock. The Dexcom and the Pod are nicer. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I completely agree.
Ken, what would you like to look at, by the way?
Funny you should mention, because we talked about MongoDB, a database software company, extending gains after a breakout yesterday. And another name that we've talked about is Splunk. I'd like to give Splunk a shout out, especially on the weekly chart, because this is looking like a good, solid first test of the 10-week moving average.
This is why you got to look at those weekly charts.
Yeah.
It didn't look like much of anything on a daily, to be honest with you.
And again, this is a topic that I'm going to be talking about in the Investors Corner for the weekend edition of IBD Weekly, but this is actually what a good first test. This is, stocks either test support or they find support. And, Splunk is, looking really good here. It's up near its high. The weekly bar is blue. It touched the 10-week moving average earlier this week and is now near its session high. So this looks like a good solid first test of the 10-week for Splunk.
Yeah, I've got this one. let's look at the daily, and what drew me to it was, again, the RS line looked pretty good especially through the middle of the base. It hasn't, gained a whole lot over the last 2 months, but it hasn't done anything wrong. And I guess I would personally, I'd like to see it, take out 160 because it's gotten turned back there a couple times, especially if that RS line is also confirming the new high in the stock before I add any shares.
The action of this one, it kind of reminds me of VRTX a little bit. It was kind of, had fallen by the wayside for a while, then it had a big move up, and it's just kind of completely different stocks, right? One is big data, one is biotech, I think this is nice action. I don't own it right now, but I think if by the time it goes through 160, I'll have a position.
I thought I'd like to pull up Vertex before I forget, because that has earnings tonight.
Oh, okay.
And this one, I'm not sure, this is it's sort of been continually testing the 10-week line for the last several weeks. It broke out here, clearing a 4 weeks tight. Is this still a valid area? How would you treat this? Because it's sort of been testing over and over again.
I'll tell you, because I have a position, and I was looking at it ahead of earnings. And what I did is I took about half the position off and then replaced that with an option. Option wasn't too expensive. And let me see, how far out did I go?
Yeah, I still have some shares of it, and I think that's a good play. That what you're doing.
Yeah. So went to the February 14th call, so 2 weeks out, we'll say. Just because sometimes on earnings, you want to see a nice big gap up to new highs and continue running, and you feel like you're on top of the world. But a lot of times they could just bounce around a little bit before they get traction. So that's why I like to go out a little bit more. But the whole idea is I've reduced my stock risk, and then with the option, I know exactly how much I can lose, and that was the amount paid for the premium. So it's kind of a halfway, to limit your risk but still have upside participation.
This is a half position on Leaderboard currently. So and it's actually one of the stocks on Leaderboard where we don't have a hefty profit cushion. So we're going to be deciding what to do ahead of earnings. And speaking of earnings, why don't we could take a look at Amazon.com.
And I will in a moment. I just wanted to just mention on Vertex that I'm going to bring it up. But on Vertex, we did a new America on this, and Allison Gallen, again, she always does a great job. I mean, Vertex is going to have a lot of strong earnings because of this new super cystic fibrosis drug, but they've really been getting into gene editing as well. So I would definitely, I'm going to put a link in today's recap email to that new America, because it is interesting, all the stuff they're doing stuff with CRISPR and some other things to continue on, because they're sort of done with cystic fibrosis.
She is a great writer. Whenever I read her stories, I'm very impressed.
So in any case, here is Amazon. Ken, take it away.
Well, I mean, it's a chart that you can find a lot of problems with, but it does have a very easily identifiable handle buy point here, a pivot 1917.82. Holding. So, but you see that, I mean, the one problem with this chart is you have the 200-day and the 50-day that are almost converging, and that is just really an example of a laggard kind of slow.
Wait, say that again that way? That was cool.
Laggard.
Yeah, laggard. Yeah. So, and again, this one was reminded me a little bit of Netflix before its earnings report, except that Netflix had actually broken out a little bit over a handle area. So, if nothing else, Amazon.com will be a widely watched earnings report after the close, and it's still a breakout candidate for sure, but a very poor relative strength line. And again, the fact that the 50-day and the 200-day are almost converged, that's just that supports a relative strength rating of 49, which is not all that great, but still we'll be watching after that.
I love buying stuff from Amazon. Do you guys?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I got I do the subscribe and save. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but if you buy at least 5 things, in a month, even the same thing, they give you 15% off. They're already great price. And so, once a month you get these big boxes full of all this stuff that you probably don't really need.
I would say about half of the stuff that I order on Amazon is arriving same day.
Yeah.
Which is,
that's
Amazon,
actually the issue. That's actually the issue for Amazon is that's why their earnings fell last quarter, and that's why they're going to probably, I think, fall this time. They're investing a ton. And the other big issue is Microsoft. Okay, why is Microsoft up so much? Because they're killing it in cloud. And it seems like they're becoming a real threat to cloud growth for Amazon Web Services, which is really almost all the profit. We talk about, I got to buy all this stuff from Amazon. Amazon doesn't make any money from anything they ship you. Maybe they make money off of the Prime memberships, but they really don't make money on the business. It's the model. It's the Amazon Web Services that's the real cash cow.
Yeah.
So I'd say if that's an issue, it's not just the revenue growth, but are they having to cut prices a little bit? Are they having to do things to, generate that business? That could be an issue because that's the sneaky thing about Amazon is that's where the money is.
They've been spending a lot to give the customer a great experience. I've been a customer for Amazon for many, many, many years. I have never ever had a delivery problem, and like I said, I get a lot of my stuff.
I'm
the same personally. I've never had a problem. Never had a problem. It arrives on time. Perfection, really.
Okay.
I actually had an Amazon driver steal another Amazon driver's package that they had left, but luckily I have Amazon Blink cameras. They own Blink, which is his camera, and so I had it on.
That's weird.
That's an Amazon ecosystem.
He went up there, put down his package, grabbed the other package that was there, and we're like, and Maribel's like running out after him, and he sped up. The point is, I called up customer service. Problem solved. Yeah. They took care of it.
Can we go back to the weekly chart on Amazon? And I know I've been poo-pooing this, but I will say, when I see a pattern like this, now it's been going sideways for 2 years or so, and if they come out with something, it's like the profitability is coming back faster, and maybe cloud, they're everyone's doing well in cloud, and this thing gaps out of that, I would be tempted to buy it, even though the problems with the RS line, just because it's these sorts of things where they get off your radar and you poo-poo them because they're lagging. But then if they have a truly powerful breakout, that would really grab my attention. The other thing, going into earnings, you say, well, you want to buy a call. Problem is, an at-the-money call would cost you about over $4,000. So if you got a huge account, and that's a tiny amount, but it's just something, people with smaller accounts, you got to wait. You got to wait for the actual report to come out and play the gap.
With you, I'm waiting for the number. I did try this about a week ago. I bought a little bit, and then I'm like, you know what? It's all about the number, because that's the way it's going to be. If they surprise us, which it wouldn't surprise me for Bezos to surprise us right here, that I'm going to be all over it, because if we get a big gap up, I'll be willing to pay up for that when it's a big liquid name like Amazon. And this is a saucer type base, and a base on base saucer is going to, by definition of the type of base that it is, shallow and stretched out, you're always going to have a low RS line and a low RS number. So I'll forgive that because of the quality of the company.
Okay.
Hey, Ed, can we jump back to the market, because the NASDAQ is fading? It was almost I don't know,
even,
maybe
then it came back, then it came back.
Right.
We're down
3.33.
Yeah, so it's not too bad. We're still sort of in that range, but it's more closer to the lows after, say, 640. I mean,
exactly.
After that would be the guess to send. A lot of people are asking about NVCR. This one obviously, this one, it's not closing below the 50-day line. 10-week. Let me look at the 10-week line.
Probably a little below the 10-week.
It's a little below the 10-week. That's actually a little above. I'm
very disappointed in how this played out. I had high hopes for it, and I bought a pretty decent sized position and then just slowly been backing away. I still have some. I'll probably give it until tomorrow, and just to see where it is. It's basically round tripped from that alternative pivot where you drew that downtrend. So that happens as part of the game, and you just have to be flexible. So like I said, it's a small position now. If it goes back above 90, I would start adding back to it. I'm not going to add to it until it gets through there. And by tomorrow, the close, I might just close the book on this one for now.
This is this is a leaderboard stock, and again, just looking at the daily chart, it's a test of the 50-day, but really not finding support. Usually at the end of the week, we go through all of our leaderboard stocks and see where they're at, in terms of their 10-week moving averages. So I'm sure this one will be a talking point tomorrow.
Okay. A lot of people are asking about in mode as well. I suppose you could say this is sort of forming a handle. I guess it would be in the upper half. It's a pretty wide up and down,
looks like it.
But it looks like it's above the half. So that'd be nice, because you don't want to, if it would have been hard to buy out here. I mean, not saying you couldn't have, and this is awfully high. So it'd be nice if there was a handle.
Yeah.
Well, we were waiting for a base to form with this one. We could very easily have a handle by the end.
But remember, it's a very deep base. So.
Yeah.
Very 41%.
Deep. Well, I think my voice doesn't allow me to do that. But I get an A for effort.
So for me, what I would be doing, I probably wouldn't. Let's say it does make a handle. I probably wouldn't be playing that on the breakout unless I approach it like a swing trade and try to grab a quick profit. I'd really be waiting for the next base, hopefully like a flat base that would form near the top of the base.
And it doesn't have a ton of, it's a newer company, but it just doesn't have a ton of great sponsors in there yet. Right. And
aside from Paula Abdul. I'm going to go through a few other things. Dynatrace holding up well after its best.
Someone said yesterday Dyna Retrace, and I think that was
that's awesome.
Hilarious. And I loved it, and it works on both ways. I mean, it sometimes it retraces negatively and sometimes positively. So that truly is the nature of the stock.
Yeah, and that's why you've got a position, just take your track price on any one of those days. Could you do that, Ed? And just look at the percent change, 8% that day, do another day, in the middle of that shelf, just, keep going. Right, so another 6%. And so when you do that, it helps you to understand what to expect. And so if you're going to trade it, then you just have a much smaller position size.
And if you go to the weekly, it looks better on the weekly. And again, that's why it's nice to take a step back from the daily action. You've got your line in the sand, at least for me, a close below the weekly, and I'm just letting it go. Maybe I don't know if I can add any to it, but
yeah.
I'm going to just mention a couple other things, just revisit a couple things that have been doing well this week. TPX, it came back to the buy point, though there was this alternative buy point, there was early entry. That might have been the better one, but if any case, this alternate entry, it's holding above that. So
we're trading that. I've got a position, you've got a position. Yeah.
And it's on leaderboard.
Yeah. Stock of the day a couple of days ago.
And today's action is great. Just go back to it just super quick, that always pay attention to where it closes within the range. So yesterday wasn't good, but the prior 2 days was good. And then today's action, where it stands right now, that's exactly what you'd like to see. The closer to the highs, the better. That's a sign of accumulation and support.
So out of all the earnings reports that we mentioned before the open and in the news, the two standouts at this point are both leaderboard stocks, ServiceNow and Tesla, both trading near highs. Corvo, Cirrus, Microsoft all have given back gains. But Tesla...
could we take a look at Microsoft? Because there was a question early on. I think it was both Microsoft and Now. So we talked about Now, but we never really looked at Microsoft. And this is not as huge as Tesla, but very similar, where there was a buy point back in October coming out of a flat base, and now it's just extended. So I wouldn't be trying to I mean, if you wanted to, you could add to your position here with a small part, although I don't really like the action that we're seeing right
well,
now.
one thing to point out on this is the green area up there out of that base, and that's telling you that's the 20 to 25% profit zone. So because you want to look at the context of what you're dealing with. This is a great company now. It had its problems. Go to a monthly chart real quick.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is now a long-term leader, and in our long-term leaders list.
Exactly.
And
there we
portfolio.
go.
It sat out for 15 plus
15
years or whatever.
Yeah.
And then reinvented itself, really like what you were talking about with the data centers and cloud and everything. And so now it's changed its character back to the olden days, kind of, but a little bit slower. So you might want to just take a little profits here and then put it in something else. And then when this sets back up, then you can, add at it might be a higher price, but a more ideal price.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to blow out an entire position, and certainly not in a place to buy it.
Although, if you're looking at it and trying to hold it as a long-term leader, I wouldn't be taking anything off. I would just be sitting with it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. It just depends on how you're approaching it.
And that RS line is just remarkable for the last, 4 years, really 5 years.
And it's been accelerating. You can sort of see these trend lines that I did. It's been accelerating these gains as it's picked up momentum in the last over that time.
Yeah. So the default on this would be to do nothing really. It's just to hold it.
All right, Chris. Is there anything you'd like to take a look at?
If could we take a look at SMH? If I could step in, this is
sure.
VanEck Vectors Semiconductor ETF. A lot of the, like I said, Lam Research and Corvo and Cirrus, they're giving back early gains, and SMH looks like it's down 1.2% or so, but it's getting close to the 50-day moving average here. So from a technical basis, we'll see if it eventually tests this key support level, which looks to be right around 140.
Let's take a look at AMD, because I know we have it on leaderboard, and a lot of people have been trading it, and it too is kind of a mirror image of SMH right now. Inside day, it's down a little bit, but it's not. This looks so far like a fairly reasonable pullback.
Yeah, and it tried to get support yesterday. You can tell by where it closed within the range. Now, if you look at the true range, which is really from the close of the prior day, it was in the bottom, near the bottom of that. But within the trading range for the day, it closed near the upper part. So at least a sign that people were stepping in, not just continuing to just dump into the close. But I'd say this looks like it's coming into the 50 days. So just prepare yourself for that. I reduced some of it yesterday. I'm trying to hold the rest, just because this is a leading stock in that group, and so you want to have some of it.
I would just point out that it seems like the chips obviously had a huge run, and I mean there's been some concerns like AMD. AMD is okay. I mean, that's fine, but their guidance wasn't great. But we saw a lot of 5G concerns. I mean, Silicon Labs, Xilinx, which is not a good stock, but those were just crushed yesterday. Corvo is, and then now we're having trouble with some of these stocks that have really seemingly good earnings and guidance. I mean, maybe they're just going to take a pause, which is also something why we might think that the market might take a pause.
Why don't you pull up Xilinx, because you mentioned that, and you said it wasn't a good stock, and it was.
Exactly. Yes.
Once it had that gap down, it completely changed the character of the stock. And so, when you have major gap downs in a stock, pretty much in almost all cases, you want to just stay away from it, because it's more of this is going to happen. And when you have a big gap down, it's almost like overhead resistance. You need just a lot of time until it resolves itself, because those players who were trapped in it back then still have stock to dump. And it's this is kind of classic.
Yeah, can we look at the monthly? Because what I think what I'm going to argue is this is kind of going back to its normal it hasn't been a big winner since the late 90s, and I mean, it had been in an uptrend, but not outperforming the market. And so last year, you saw that RS line really going up, and so it was out of character. And maybe it's just going back to its normal state.
That's right on. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
In the short run, chips are having the issue of like China shut down, which is also going to hurt their production, but also maybe some demand. I would just also say like 5G. There's just a little bit of concern. I think it'll be very interesting to see in the coming days and weeks from the buyers and the suppliers and the product makers, the telecom companies, what they're saying about 5G, because if 5G is not as hot as people say, that is a problem for chips and really the whole stock market rally. Because the market rally has been so much on chips. But
I just wanted to add to, after a huge run for semiconductor stocks, no one would be surprised to see a consolidation. I think, Ed, that was the point that you were making.
Yeah.
So that would be perfectly normal after huge gains for the chip makers, chip equipment firms, chip designers. But what's very interesting is that we pointed out ServiceNow holding gains today after a breakout. The software sector is still very strong. I want to just take a look at a chart for Salesforce. CRM.
Oh my God, that's exactly what I wanted to go to.
Okay,
great minds.
Yeah, I mean,
it's going all over the place.
Great minds or simple minds. Either way.
You look at the recent selling in semiconductor stocks, but you got these software stocks like ServiceNow, and the list goes on and on and on. But Salesforce, you see how it's just holding above 180 here, and go to the weekly chart. You very easily could have a 3 weeks tight pattern.
It does have a 3 weeks tight pattern
at the end of this week, or maybe
it already does. And so
a monthly on this one.
Yeah, but that would be right now. This would be the buy point on the 3 weeks tight. Just to throw that out.
Yeah. Okay. So the end of this week would be 4 weeks tight. Yeah.
So over the years, this has had some periods of having the look and performance of a long-term leader, and it's had a nice run in 2016, 2017, and then took off the last year or so. And this could be a spot where it's resuming a nice, steady rise. Let's go back to the weekly. Let's look at some of the numbers, because I think there's one thing that it doesn't fit.
What did you want to take a look at?
To the weekly.
Okay, sorry.
So the stability is 9, so that's on the
high end. We max out at 10, but
right.
we like under 5.
Yeah, this used to have always stable, but then this one really that really knocked it.
And then the 2021 estimate is 7%. So usually we like to see double-digit gains for both years. Still, that sales growth is steady and actually accelerated the last quarter. So
it might have been an acquisition. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I think there was because I'm looking at an earnings line on our institutional product, and it was kind of steady, and then it went up, and I think that impacted the stability rating. So we do use judgment with this, and so I think you're right. It's certainly a candidate for a long-term leader. I've got a position in it, and we put it on Swing Trader recently. And it's a slower, pokier type of name, so you're not expecting the move like a ServiceNow with it. But I think today's action, given the tape that we have, it's perfect, and it's showing relative strength. And the sponsorship is, all the great sponsors, almost all the great sponsors are in this one.
Yeah, I'm just going to call up one more stock that has earnings tonight, just because Visa, another long-term leader.
Now this truly is a long-term.
Yeah, and this
like
one
classic.
Also. Now we've already had MasterCard, we've already had PayPal, so it could be that there isn't the most amazing moves on earnings. But we'll see. They often do move. So just wanted to bring that one up. It's been acting well. Chris, I was going to do a rundown if we.
Let's check the market.
Yeah,
one
market
last time,
is fading once again.
Right. So we're at the lowest level since the first 5-minute bar. So we're within the almost midpoint of the first 5-minute bar, so we faded back.
Yeah, getting close, to that lower end. So, let's, just as we mentioned, Corvo. Look at that. That's not fun at all.
Wow.
Cirrus basically given up all those gains, so that doesn't look well. It's not all the
it's
gains.
still up
5%.
That doesn't look right.
Back to the base. Back to the base. I'm sorry. LRCX. So there's that. So definitely a message for the that service now that's doing well. The software is holding up better. In just these related stocks team.
You know what? That would make sense because software. I mean, medicals and chips led the market in October and were the early leaders, and now software has been, coming back to the fore, and so it makes sense that chips are a little tired, need some rest, and software is doing better right now.
So Mongo
a little
here.
rotation,
Yep.
Mongo extending its breakout. Okta, well, it's pulled back a little bit, but it's having a solid day. Tesla, I guess you got to say that's not having a bad day.
Can I hear that again?
It's absolutely doing great.
Hey, do you love Elon Musk? Because
Sure.
when you do, that's when I'll sell. Either that or the 10.
I meant to answer this question, then I'll answer it live. I was just saying wedgie. This sort of looked wedgie when the stock sort of goes up. You want to see a handle shake out. The people, and it wasn't really shaking too much out because on a daily, sort of like moving up. You probably wouldn't have been shaken out. This is a shakeout now.
Yep.
You like to see a handles downward sloping. Datadog, that one is another software IPO.
Well,
Luckin, it's back above the 50-day line. You can't stop it.
Trying.
Testing support. Can't give up on it.
Disney bad, or just in general bad. Not too bad today. Yeti, sort of.
Stay away from Yeti.
Big furry base.
Yeah. I mean, it might go a lot higher, but I don't think you could withstand it without a tiny position, I think.
Alibaba at lows of the day, back below the 50-day line. I mean, not too bad, though. PayPal sort of hanging in there. Facebook. Not doing too bad.
It's getting, that's kind of like AMD-ish yesterday, where AMD had the big gap down and then closed in the top part. So it's, you got to be honest, it's trying to get support at the 50-day.
Oh, absolutely. Tandem extending, looking good.
Yeah.
DXCM, just sort of shelf above the base.
Just with the DXCM real quick, that yesterday's action was kind of like a setup day. The way it closed at the highs, at the high of that area, and the fact that Tandem had moved up and these tend to kind of trade together, that I was expecting it to move higher. Now this isn't an expectation breaker. It's just
expectation delayer.
Neutral.
It looks a lot like Vertex, breakout, just kind of,
That's what I was going to call it next, actually. Yeah,
not doing anything wrong.
Vertex has earnings tonight. Visa has earnings tonight. Amazon has earnings tonight. Amazon has a base, but it's obviously got some
I hope
issues.
that opens up at 2,000 plus tomorrow. I'd love to see that.
And InMode has maybe sort of a handle about to form here. The market has continued to weaken. It looks like we're down about 0.5% on the NASDAQ and similar action on the other indexes. So still within the recent range, and that's really what we'd be wanting to look at. If we can do that, that would be great.
Again, that's the high from Friday, the low from Monday, just staying within that. And I would not be surprised that if a week from now, we shook out below just a little bit, testing the low of Monday. So those are expectations, not predictions, just based off of what would be normal and healthy. So we'll see how it plays out.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for today. We answered a lot of questions today. We're going to include a link to the file with all the answered questions and the recap that we have, and the responses will be part of that recap letter, and I'll forward it on to some folks that aren't getting that themselves. So stay frosty. There's a lot of interesting action, good and bad, on the market today, and I will see you soon.